Well, again, I had listened to a lot of music all my life. I started listening to American pop first and foremost, perhaps after Cuban dance music, accompanying my slightly older sister to her first teenage parties in Havana and that kind of thing. But eventually it grew into jazz, my avocation. My father had become instrumental in the first Cuban record label, which he helped create by winning a monopoly suit against RCA Victor. And this Cuban label called Panart recorded a landmark album called the Cuban Jam Session. And it was Cuban music going into improvisation. So as close to Cuban music got to jazz at the time, and it was quite revealing. And so that was the first time I was struck with Cuban music being something other than music to dance to. So slowly but surely I became immersed in Latin jazz through a painter friend of mine here in South Florida called Arturo Rodriguez, who would paint to Latin jazz. And I communicated this passion onto Fernando Trueba, who became an addict. It was addictive. We used to wear our thumbs down in record shelves looking for, anything, CDs or albums that would have, in the jazz sections that would have, a little Latin tinge or a little Latin percussion. And it was through those explorations and adventures that the Dictionary of Latin Jazz was born, that our radio show in Spain was born, that the documentary Calle 54 was born, that our record label named after the documentary was born, and that our career as Grammy Award-winning music producers was born. It is immensely rewarding to go into a studio with master musicians, and we were always blessed to work with the top in their profession, because sure, it's more expensive to pay for a master than for a journeyman, but they get it right away and they give it back to you in spades. And of course, when you're talking about jazz, usually the first take is the one that works, that's the freshest. And we made sure we were surrounded by people who did the musicians justice in the recording booth. So we work with remarkable audio engineers, people who were artists in their own right in capturing the sound of the music that we were producing. And the beautiful thing for Fernando and I as music producers is you'd arrive at the studio with an album in your head, and yet you're working with such remarkable artists that more often than not, the album that you left the studio with far exceeds what you had in your mind to begin with. And that was our reward. So again, Fernando and I have only the greatest memories of, making or recording music, and you're just blessed to be in the company of magicians and great artists who express themselves through their instruments.